lesson's all about the cameras and lenses for food photography. Now, as Chase Jarvis popularly coined the phrase, the best camera is the one that you have with you, well, I'm just going to amend it a little bit and say the best camera is the one that you own already. I'm not going to try to convince you to go out and buy a new camera just for food photography. Instead, as your experience grows, so will the gear that you own. It seems that with a market completely saturated with hundreds of different types of camera brands out there, confusion only grows as to which one you should buy. So in this lesson, I'm going to go over different types of cameras and the pros and cons when it comes to shooting food. For the most part, I'm a nerd when it comes to gear myself. I mean, I dream of the latest cameras and lenses and how they'll help my photography, and just like everyone else does. But now when I buy cameras or I buy lenses, I really literally use them until they just die of old age. At the start, buying an excessive amount of gear is kind of normal. But as you start to work at it, you realize what is essential and what is not. And so now I really dialed back the amount of gear that I own to just the bare bones of what I need to do my craft. And I really wish I would have started out that way, because I would have saved myself a lot of time and money. Now, excluding the camera systems that exceed pretty much everyone's budget, like medium format, there's really only three types of camera systems out there. There's the mirrorless, the DSLR, and everything else. Now, mirrorless, like Sony's, Panasonic, or these Fujifilm cameras, they're a lightweight body that's replaced the mirror with an electronic viewfinder. Now, they function and operate exactly the same as their bigger DSLR brothers, and they come with a variety of lenses. And they even have that cool retro feel if that's something you're looking for in a camera. For natural light food photography, these mirrorless cameras work just great. These Fujifilm cameras like the X-T1 and X-E2 have some really sharp lenses and give you fantastic image quality for food photography. I recommend them for any photographer just starting out and who want a great quality with ease of shooting a variety of different genres of photography. However, the hardships of not having a mirror and relying solely on the electronic viewfinder, the LCD is always on, which means the battery life is short and will most likely die before your food even becomes cold. And because you're seeing what the sensor is recording, it's hard to see and therefore grab focus or compose your food with low light and or trying to use artificial lights in your photography. DSLRs are a little bit bigger, however, you have a mirror and a bright viewfinder to focus and compose with no matter what time of day it is. Functioning in the same way with DSLRs, especially Canon and Nikon, you'll have a huge amount of lenses and accessories to play around with. Now, the only difference between the two is the sensor, and actually these three have a slightly smaller sensor than the full-frame 35mm of this 5DS. And what does that mean for you and your food photography? Well, nothing really. I mean, because sensor technology right now is so good that the image quality is outstanding in all of these cameras. The only real difference is that this 50mm lens on this camera is actually 50mm. However, when I slap it on this 70D, or if I place the 50 on this Fujifilm camera, the lens would have a magnification, turning it into something like a 75mm. Now, that could be good or bad depending on what you're trying to do, but for me personally, I like to come to the idea of the photograph or the vision with a lens already in my mind. So unlike these cameras with the 5DS and its full frame, I slap a lens on there and I don't have to do the math in my head. Also, I choose full frame because of image quality. The more pixels you try to cram onto a sensor, the more detail you'll see, however, also the more noise you'll see. But like I said, sensor technology and how cameras deal with noise is so good right now that it really makes this a moot point. Personally, I would care less about the camera body for food photography and more about the lenses. This is where I want to spend my money. Some of my favorite lenses are the 100mm f2.8 macro lens, the 50mm 1.2, and the 24-70 zoom lens that's 2.8 as well from Canon. However, you can get the equivalent of these lenses in Nikon as well. I use the 100mm macro lens not as a macro, but mainly when I'm shooting in front of the food, as it provides razor sharp focus with some really good out of focus depth of field to my backgrounds. The 50mm lens is also great from in front of the food, but I really like to use it when I'm shooting from above. It's also razor sharp and provides some great bokeh to my backgrounds. The 24-70mm zoom lens is a fantastic workhorse lens that I use mainly between 50 and 70mm. So when I'm on location shooting food, I can just whip it off the tripod and start shooting some action shots of the chef. And this is actually the lens that I would recommend to most people starting out, because not only is it razor sharp and great in low light because it goes down to f2.8, but you can zoom in and out, covering the variety of angles that most people want. However, for the price of this lens, you might be able to pick up both of these lenses. Another lens for the full frame or crop sensor DSLR would be this Canon 45mm tilt shift lens, or its equivalent in whatever camera brand you have. It's really sharp and gives you the ability to control the perspective, giving you a very tight plane of focus and a really cool miniature effect to your images. Tilt shift lenses are actually really great to have for landscape and architecture photography as well. Now onto the mirrorless lenses, we really have the same focal lengths. However, since we're placing them on a crop sensor, the focal length is less. One of my favorite lenses is actually this Fujifilm 35mm 1.4, because it's the same ratio as my 50mm, and I use it mainly for shooting above the table. It's probably one of the sharpest lenses I've worked with, and it's a great travel and portrait lens as well. For in front of the food, I like this Fujifilm 60mm f2.8 macro. It works just like my Canon 100mm macro. Now, both of these lenses are super sharp, great for natural low light photography, and both give me equally creamy bokeh in my backgrounds. Now, if you're in the something else category of cameras, maybe you shoot with your phone camera or a point and shoot, that's great. I mean, you might want to change as your skill level grows, but for now, work with it. Get it to work for you. It's really only important to focus on great lighting and good composition. Really work with the camera that you own right now. This course is not about getting you to change your camera or your gear. That's the advanced course. No, but really working on your lighting, your composition, your styling, improving that is much more important than improving your camera gear.